Welcome to Pegwarmers. I'm Kevin, and I'm here to talk about toys. Today, we are talking about one of my all-time favorite GI Joe vehicles, the Tomahawk. It's almost Christmas. I've been thinking about Christmas presents from my childhood and some of the episodes that I've done way in the past. I think I might even have a playlist for the Christmas memories. Videos that I make about toys that I got, usually with some home video footage. Today's subject predates that, but I have been putting off reviewing the Tomahawk for a really long time. I think because it's my favorite GI Joe aircraft and one of my all-time favorite GI Joe toys. And I was always worried about not doing it justice. And I just decided, you know what, I need to film this so that way I've talked about it. I want to get some of these things that I've put on a pedestal and waited on. I want to do them. I just want to have fun reviewing some of these things. One of my goals this year was to try to do a little bit more GI Joe content. And so we're going to talk about the Tomahawk today. The GI Joe Tomahawk is a troop transport helicopter released in 1986 for the GI Joe, a Real American Hero toy line. They did give this vehicle some military weapon capabilities because that's what makes these toys fun, but its dual rotor blades and crew compartment makes it much more of a troop carrier than, say, the Dragonfly, which is actually an attack helicopter. The Tomahawk was released in tan plastic with a gray overspray camo pattern on it. It can hold 5 troops in its crew compartment as well as a pilot and co-pilot. It has a machine gun on the front, missiles on its fins and lower deck, and a bunch of other cool features that make it so much fun to play with. When the Tomahawk came out in 1986, I was not lucky enough to get one. I did get a chance to play with one, though, because a boy that my mom babysat for, whose name was Sean, had one, and he would bring it to my house all the time. So he would be there before and after school, or on days we were off school and things like that while his parents were at work. I lucked out a lot that way as a kid, where I got to play with other kids' toys because my mom would babysit other kids our age, and they would often leave stuff in my basement for weeks and months at a time, or even just overnight sometimes, or just during the day, and we'd share it. It was a lot of fun, and Sean brought the Tomahawk, and I almost immediately asked him, what's the name of the pilot? And he's like, I don't know. And I said, well, didn't you save the file card? He's like, no, we don't do that. I was like, well, what are we going to call him? Now, I have a little bit of an extra passion for aircraft and for GI Joe and just in general because my dad was a helicopter mechanic. That was his occupation for his entire career. So because we didn't have a code name for the pilot, he was swiftly named Donald. So that way we had a name for the figure. We pretended my dad shaved his beard and joined the military. I had so much fun playing with the Tomahawk with Sean, sometimes at his house, sometimes at my house. We were such good friends from my mom babysitting him that I would sometimes go over to his house on the weekends and things like that to play with him. A little while later, I was at the local firehouse flea market where I often did a lot of hunting for GI Joe and vintage Star Wars toys as a kid. I found a vendor, a family who was getting rid of some toys that had a box of GI Joes, and they were cheap, but I was a kid, so I didn't have a lot of money, and I'm digging through this bin. I don't know if they were $2 or, something like that, maybe $3, maybe only $1. I'm digging through the bin, and I'm, there's a lot of guys here I have, and 2 figures stood out to me that I really wanted. There was Lift Ticket, the pilot to the Tomahawk, and there was Zartan. I had always really wanted a Zartan. There's a lot of core GI Joe characters that I did not have as a kid, just based on when I jumped into the line. It was hard to get like a Battle Helmet Cobra Commander. It was hard to get Snake Eyes. It was hard to get Storm Shadow. It was hard to get Destro. Because I got in 86, and those characters were all in the cartoon from Season 1, and the miniseries rolled into Season 2, which was really the season that had all the characters that I had as toys. And so I was debating between Zartan and Lift Ticket, and I felt like I would just never get the Tomahawk because it was so big and had to be so expensive. So I picked Lift Ticket. This is one of my biggest flea market regrets. Why? did I pick lift ticket. I would not get a Zartan in my collection until I was basically an adult collector. Sometime in college, I got a Zartan. Now, the one at the flea market may have been missing some of his pads, and maybe that was why I passed on him. He just didn't look complete. And lift ticket doesn't have any accessories to lose, really, other than the microphone, which just is always lost. So, when I finally got a Tomahawk, I had a lift ticket for both seats. Christmas 1987 rolls around. They are heavily advertising the Cobra Mamba on TV.
But here's the Cobra Mamba.
Cobra Mamba, its power is frightening. Out of the blue, it strikes like lightning.
I knew that I was going to get the Mamba. I had seen it sitting on like the layaway counter at Kmart while I was walking around and thought, oh, I really hope that one's for me. And then my mom took her coat off at some point and laid it in the bottom of the shopping cart, and I could see just a little bit of the box. She was trying to hide it in the cart from me until she got to ring it up. She probably would have sent my sister and I to go look at something and then, paid for what she bought. So I knew I was getting the Mamba that year, but my mind was blown when I unwrapped both the Mamba and the Tomahawk. The only other G.I. Joe thing I definitely remember getting that year was Dr. Mindbender, and I remember taking his cape off to be able to put it on a secondhand Serpentor I owned that didn't have a cape. And I changed it back and forth a few times, but I felt like Serpentor with his backpack headdress thing was cool enough to live without the cape, because Mindbender looked kind of bland without his. And so I didn't switch it too often after that initial, play day of Christmas morning, Christmas afternoon, playing with all my stuff after my dad put the vehicles together. The Tomahawk was a gift from my grandmother, my mom's mom, who I always called Grammy, and I actually remember taking the Tomahawk to her house one time to play with it, loaded up with Joe's, and I set it on her dining room table, and she goes, "Where'd you get that?" And I was like, "This is what you gave me for Christmas." And she's like, "Oh." Later, I found out from my mom that my mom always picked out the presents my grandmother gave me. She would give my mom money, and my mom would pick out stuff that my mom knew we would like, which worked out really well. But I still have this, kind of warm spot in my heart that the Tomahawk was a gift from my grandmother, and I even remember, the green Disney wrapping paper, Disney Christmas Carol type wrapping paper that it was wrapped in. It was really kind of a cool moment. I have always loved the GI Joe Ram, which is a small motorcycle from 1982. It's one of the first vehicles I ever had. It came in a box of hand-me-downs from a neighbor kid, along with the Vamp and a kind of busted-up Dragonfly and a Jump. Oh, and an MMS, but a lot of the toys were either partially broken or missing some pieces, so the Ram was kind of the coolest one to me. Then later, the Tomahawk just was so cool. My dad worked on a Sikorsky helicopter, sometimes referred to as the Sea King, and the Tomahawk was really a amalgamation of the Sea King and the Chinook. The Chinook has the double rotor blades and a ramp in the back. Some models of the Sea King have the ramp, but the general shape of the helicopter kind of reminds me of the Sea King. As a kid growing up, getting to see real helicopters, real big, heavy lift helicopters at my dad's work, and then having this toy, even though it wasn't a 100% match, was just super fun and super cool. It lit up my imagination, and I would load it up with guys and take it outside to play all the time, and or play with it inside. And I was super careful about not breaking the rotors, because I knew a lot of kids that had them with busted rotor blades. In fact, a friend of mine named Britt, who was a couple years younger than me, had one. I assume it was his older brother's, but it was completely destroyed. And when I would go over to his house to play, we would pretend my Tomahawk would get shot down, and then we would switch to the destroyed one on the ground, and the Joe's trying to climb out of the wreckage and things like that. It was always really cool. Even though the Tomahawk is a vehicle, it was always almost a play set. You know how people question the Defiant, the Rolling Thunder, and things like that? Are they play sets? Are they vehicles, right? They roll, but they have all these play features. The Tomahawk is kind of similar, in my opinion. I didn't have the tactical battle platform or the mobile command center or the Terradrome when I first got this. Eventually I got a second-hand mobile command center. But the Tomahawk has multiple crew compartments. It has machine guns on the side the guys can use. There's a ramp you can put down. It has a winch that you can lower a hook and raise up something and tow something underneath of it. It rolls on its wheels. It has engine covers that can come off. There's really just a lot of play value, from flying it to fighting from within it, lifting things up and carrying them, dropping things out the ramp. Not that anything really fit out the ramp. That was kind of the design flaw on this. It was not tall enough for anybody to stand in it. So, like, even the ram didn't really fit. But, you know, it was still kind of fun to pretend. And you could, you know, sit crazy legs on the ramp and have them parachute. I don't know, kid logic, you know. The front crew compartment, the canopy folds open. There's 2 seats inside. They each have a little joystick thing. I actually took those joysticks out of mine as a kid because they made it harder to put the figures in and out. Eventually, I had to track down replacement ones to put in mine. The Tomahawk that you are seeing in this video is my childhood Tomahawk. It is my all-time favorite thing in my entire collection. My buddy Nick knows, because we would always joke about stuff, driving at conventions and stuff, and I would always say to him, I could be homeless living in a box, and that Tomahawk would be in the box with me. It's the one thing that I don't think I could ever part with. Like, if I went down to where I lived in an old folks' home, and I just had, like, a dresser, Tomahawk sits on top of the dresser. I should probably look into getting plastic polish to clean up the windshield. It is very fogged. There are 5 seats inside. They can be unpegged, so you can kind of make bigger clearance or a bigger space in there. The machine guns really don't remove easily, so they're kind of always in the way. You can't really just clear out the back to put a vehicle in there. Although in reality, like in real military helicopters, you could put a small vehicle like a Jeep inside a vehicle like this. The Chinook carries some pretty big pieces of machinery inside it. Those small white missiles from this vehicle also came in the vehicle weapon pack. One of the odder parts of the GI Joe toy line, there were action figure accessory packs that came with replacement guns and helmets for your guys. They also did a vehicle accessory pack that came with replacement parts for some of those 1986 vehicles, and the Tomahawk bombs are available there in gray. The Tomahawk just really packed in a ton of play feature. I would love having guys trying to, like, fix it. It was just the key vehicle in pretty much all my childhood adventures. People love the Sky Striker and the Night Raven and some of the jets, but I feel like they do a lot less. Yes, the landing gear opens and closes, or on the Sky Striker, the wings open and close. They may have an engine compartment or two. You can, like, reload the bombs. You put the guys in the cockpit. But that crew compartment and the flexibility of taking the seats in and out and being able to hang things from the hook on the bottom, whether that's a Joe assaulting a Cobra base or, like, rescuing a Jeep, I just always thought that the Tomahawk was fantastic. The Tomahawk got featured in the cartoon a ton. It's even real small on the poster for GI Joe the movie, but it was used in a lot of episodes starting with Season 2, and of course GI Joe the movie had a couple major scenes with the Tomahawk. Chuckles getting on top to spin the rotor blades to get it to start, and then them being shot down by the weird vine guns. Falcon taking a Tomahawk to the Himalayas to rescue Roadblock and Cobra Commander. In the cartoons, sometimes there were, like, sliding doors on the side that looked really cool. That was not a feature on the actual helicopter toy. The front Gatling gun underneath the seats was really cool. I actually bought a APC troop carrier one time at a flea market, thinking it was complete or close to being complete. And when I got it home, I realized the turret gun was not the APC's turret gun, but was the gun to the Tomahawk just sort of set up there. It doesn't really clip in quite right, and that's how I figured it out. I was, like, trying to get it to attach, and I realized, oh, this is the wrong weapon. I'm pretty sure Lift Ticket was an all-new figure. He's got kind of a bulbous red helmet on that has, like, a visor at the top. I always wished that his helmet was removable, and I kind of have said many times that I think all G.I. Joes should have had removable helmets. It's okay if the Cobras had their helmets permanently attached, because their faces are usually supposed to be hidden. But definitely the sculpted on helmets are weaker. He's got that painted on face, and so his nose rubs very easily. He's got a little hole in the side of the helmet, which is where his little tiny mic pegs in, his only accessory that is frequently lost. But he's got a nice looking vest. It's got like a microphone attached on his shoulder there. He's got some red pads on his arms, long sleeves. I like the green part of the jumpsuit with the tan. The red does make it pop, although I don't know how practical that is, but, you know, he shouldn't really be in combat unless he's shot down. He has a knife holstered on one side and a pistol holstered on the other side, some other pockets on his chest, and big red knee pads. I always kind of liked the guys with knee pads when I was a kid. I'm not sure why, but Lift Ticket had them, and so that was part of his allure. And his outfit from the neck down was repainted for a Sky Patrol figure, Airborne, and looks fantastic in the blue and tan colors they use for that figure. I have a few pieces in my collection of original G.I. Joe comic book art or artwork created by G.I. Joe comic creators. One of the things that I have that I think is pretty cool is a portrait of Lift Ticket done by artist Joe Del Bedo. This is a portrait he did for Order of Battle, a comic book series that showed off the Joes, the Cobras, and their vehicles over 3 different issues. And Joe does reproduction, like redraws, recreates his artwork from that and sells it. And I had him do Lift Ticket as well as a couple other characters at one point in time. I also have a couple of more modern IDW comic book pages from Larry Hama's run there, with S.L. Gallant doing the art, that has the Tomahawk featured on a couple panels. When I was able to purchase a few pages, I often looked for pages that had characters I liked, and when I saw the Tomahawk was in part of a story, I was like, yeah, let me grab those. I really do like this vehicle in all of its different media appearances and different reincarnations. I think it's a real shame that this vehicle was never reissued in its original form, because it's a fantastic vehicle. They did upgrade it at one point in some ways. The Eagle Hawk, I believe is what it's called. The Tomahawk was remade during the Pursuit of Cobra era, and it now has foldable rotor blades, which makes it store a lot easier. It has a more tinted windshield. I don't remember all of the little details. I think the winch works differently. Might even be mounted up top instead of underneath. So it has some differences, but it is a pretty nice recreation successor to it, kind of like how they had redone the Sky Striker at one point. So it has one reissue, not necessarily in the O-ring world, but definitely a cool vehicle and could be really neat in other paint schemes. Standard military green could look great. I think a snow paint scheme could look really cool. It's mostly like a desert paint scheme, I guess, with the tan and gray. It never really matched anything else I had as a kid. I guess the Mobat might be the closest thing to like a unit or things that kind of go together. Like the early 82 stuff was all the same drab green, and then they got more creative and kind of branched out. But there's not too many tan vehicles. So if you get your hands on a Tomahawk or you have the option to buy one, make sure Lift Ticket has his mic if you want that. Make sure the control sticks are there. Check the tabs carefully. You know, if you touch any of the like engine covers, they should be nice and snug. I don't know if I would try to open them. Even like the little wings and at the front and the back of the helicopter, if you can see inside, you might be able to see the little pegs to hold them on, make sure they're all in good shape. Because there are kind of fragile parts to the Tomahawk. Check how the blades are. Are they bowed? Are they warped? That can be a little frustrating, and it's a little hairy trying to take them out. You can kind of pry open the rotor head with a butter knife and slide them out if you need to transport it, or if you need to swap one out with a straighter one that you buy on the secondary market if the one you get is a little damaged. I actually moved the Tomahawk from my old house to storage in its own trip. I just babied it. Coming back here, I don't remember if it came on its own. It might have, or I might have loaded other stuff, but it was the only thing like behind the seat inside the cab of my truck. I have spent put a lot of effort into keeping that in good shape. I even fell out of my bed as a kid one time. On the far side of my bed, I used to keep my GI Joe vehicles on the floor, and I actually fell out of bed one time and landed like superhero pose, kind of playing Twister, like hand down, feet down, and it was under me, but I didn't hit, or blade didn't break it. And so now I would really hate to break it as an adult, considering it survived my entire childhood. I love the Tomahawk. In the comments down below, let me know what your favorite G.I. Joe vehicle is. What are your thoughts on the Tomahawk? I know this isn't a super in-depth review. I didn't go over every little thing about it. But I just wanted to talk about this vehicle. I know there are great reviews out there, and so sometimes I don't want to bog down with the nitty-gritty of everything, so I can, just share my interaction with this toy. And man, is it a good toy. So if the Tomahawk was based on the Sea King, it would have one rotor blade at the top near the crew and then the tail rotor in the back. If it was a Chinook, it has the 2 upper blades. I don't think there are any helicopters that have 2 main rotor hubs and a tail rotor like the Tomahawk. It's a very unique and kind of science fiction-y vehicle. It has an extra engine, too, at the back, a jet engine towards the back, which I think is also pretty unusual or maybe even fictional. But that's part of what makes it a cool vehicle. You know, G.I. Joe always had stuff that kind of looked like real military, but always had a little edge to it, a little something special. And that's part of the magic of that vehicle. In my collection, I have the box to the Tomahawk. I believe this is my best friend Derek's Tomahawk box. His Tomahawk is hanging from fishing wire from the ceiling of his childhood bedroom at his parents' house with some Joes in the seats. Probably all of their rubber bands have popped by this point. There's probably even like half of a paratrooper hanging from the hook, and the legs have probably fallen by this point. It's been a long time. The box has some great art, really fun action. It's got Lift Ticket and Sci-Fi sitting in the front. Sci-Fi's got his laser with him like he's going to shoot through the windscreen here. In the back, Roadblock's manning the machine gun. He's like kneeling down in a place that nobody really goes. It's more likely that Iceberg would be the one firing that machine gun if you're talking about the actual toy. And Lift Ticket's in the back looking kind of scared. One of my other favorite things with a box like this is instead of there being a window to actually see the pilot, there's a prototype photo there of Lift Ticket. And if you look at that, you can see it's got the idea, but it's definitely different. The shape of his helmet's considerably different. His pockets are not nearly as puffy, and the shape of the knee pad seems a little bit different. This prototype is probably built out of some parts from other figures that have then had some details added. I think his chest is snow jobs. I think I can see the, like... In my recent York toy hunting episode, I talked about how I just got an uncut Lift Ticket card. Victor Sikorsky, he's a rotary wing pilot and fixed wing pilot from Lawton, Oklahoma. Lift Ticket was one of those guys who joined the Army to get out of his hometown. The big difference with Lift Ticket was that he scored so high on the aptitude test that he qualified for West Point Prep. As a kid, I had a Dragonfly helicopter that the skids would never stay on, and a Tomahawk helicopter, making up a huge part of my GI Joe Air Force, backed up by the Conquest jet and the Mud Fighter. That's probably the extent of my GI Joe Air Force for many, many years. But they were all fun vehicles. The Tomahawk just kind of had a special place in my heart. I really appreciate you guys watching. I hope you guys are getting ready for the holidays and have a great holiday season. Next week, we're going to have a special Christmas episode with Tony from Hack the Movies. So make sure you check back. That episode should come out on Wednesday, Christmas Day, or the evening of Christmas Day. Do me a favor, hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't done so. Share this video with a toy collecting friend. If you want to support the channel further, consider joining us on Patreon. Thanks for hanging on the peg with me.